Welcome to Literary Ramblings Podcast, brought to you by Endeavor Brewing and Spirits in Columbus, Ohio. We are four friends who've been in the book club that's gathered for more than a decade. We read serious fiction, and this podcast reflects our discussion and collaborative analysis. We provide some context and background info, but it is by no means a comprehensive analysis, simply a conversation amongst friends. There will be spoilers, so if you haven't read the novel and would prefer not to hear plot points, please pause this now, go read the book, and then press play.
Hello and welcome to Literary Ramblings. On this episode, we're discussing the 2011 novel My Brilliant Friend by the Italian author known as Elena Ferrante. My Brilliant Friend is the first volume of a four-part series known collectively as the Neapolitan novels. My Brilliant Friend was originally published in Italian, and an English translation by Anne Goldstein was published in 2012. Wes suggested we read this book. So Wes, why don't you tell us a bit about how it got on your radar and piqued your interest?
Sure, yeah. Well, for the three of you, it will be no surprise that the reason it initially came on my radar was because they were kind of marketed as being one work, and you put them all together, they're 1,800 pages or something.
Are they that long?
All four of them together, yeah.
Do you like long things like that, Wes? Like long fiction?
Yeah.
Oh, strange.
You didn't know that.
I didn't realize that it came to be 1,800 pages.
Yeah, it's like 17 or 1,800.
Okay.
So that's how it came onto my radar. And I've owned them for actually many years at this point, and I just hadn't gotten around to reading them because I have a lot of books I haven't gotten around to reading. It was topping the list. I think we were looking at Times. Was it Times 100 Best Books of the 21st Century?
Yeah.
We were doing that for a little while, and that was at the number one spot, which we can talk more about whether that was justified later. But when I saw that, I thought, man, we should really take this on, see what the hype is about. And it's actually one of the most popular books I've read in a really long time.
Yeah, it's very popular.
Yeah.
This is a mainstream move for us.
Yeah.
It is. It had like 400,000 ratings on Goodreads.
Yeah. So Kevin, without going into too much detail, what are your opening comments? Do you like it, dislike it? What's a quick take?
I liked it. I mean, it read easy. I'm interested to talk later. I could not stop thinking about Sula by Toni Morrison and the friendship between Nell and Sula.
Yeah.
It was just, and I'm biased because I teach the book, so I've read that book, maybe a dozen times. So I kept thinking about it in comparison to like other books that really are like this deep dive into a really, a friendship that is complicated. And so in that sense, I was engaged. I thought there were moments that it like lost momentum. I thought the entire wedding sequence at the end was really strong. I was really engaged by that whole last like maybe 70 pages or so. So yeah, I'm not sure where I've landed overall, but I was definitely engaged.
Scott, what about you?
Yeah, I know you particularly, Joe, and I think all of us sort of share a skepticism of the popular book that hasn't really stood the test of time. And I think that's fair for this. It's been around for a little while, and there's also this sort of fad book problem where the book clubs get tied into a book and everyone's talking about it for a couple of years and it kind of goes away because it's not a really hot topic that's teaching us all something about a place and time. And my fear picking this book up was that it might fit into one of those two sort of categories. And to a degree, I think it sort of does. But I was kind of blown away. Like, it really shocked me how solid this book was. It's one of the best things I think I've read for a while. In a sense that it's not complex. It's not postmodern. It's not fairly simple. But there's this easy grace to it that I get when I read things like Tolstoy. Yeah. That you just get drawn into the simplicity and the rhythm of the language, that you can't really pull out and like break apart.
Yeah.
And it really captured me in that sense. And I loved some of the linguistic play, the code switching, the subtle symbolism, the reference to Greek mythology, things like that really stood out to me.
A lot of what you just said is exactly how I felt about Bel Canto.
Yeah.
Which I had a similar thought where I'm like, is it, Anne Patchett she's Oprah's book. She's like everything right now. I was a little nervous, and then Bel Canto really, really, really stunned me for a lot of the same reasons, even though it's not crazy complex in its structure or anything like that. Yeah.
And I would agree with you that Bel Canto would be I had a similar reaction to that too. I think I would rank this slightly above that from my perspective. Totally open to other people putting those in reverse order too.
And I would say too, like, without going too far afield here, I liked it so much that I just kept going with it. So I'm about halfway through the third book, and I think it retains that momentum the whole time. And in my opinion, I think it gets better.
Nice.
Yeah, I definitely am going to continue reading.
How old you're in the third book. How old are they?
They are actually not as old as you might think. They're about 25 right now.
Okay.
I'm not sure where the book's going to end.
Huh. Yeah, I was a little bit stunned at how they're 16 when this book ends. I'm like, I thought, because the opening little prologue, she's in
70.
And apparently the Reno is like the next generation.
Right. What about you, Joe? What did you think?
Well, I want to hear. I'm really curious to see how the podcast goes and what the three of you have to say. I wasn't drawn into the book, and I ended up about halfway through it switching over to audio and listening to it. I don't know why it didn't. It could have just been me not being at the right place at the right time. Sometimes a book hits you, and you're ready to receive that book. But I want to be careful because I know how well respected the book is, and I know how popular it is. And I don't want to be like the naysayers. It's not that great. It's overrated. Because I do think there's a lot here, and it could have just been at the time and the place that I picked up the book, it wasn't working for me really well. But I do see a lot of things that are of value in it. But I'll be curious to hear as the conversation goes on what you all have to say about it. Yeah. So before we get too deep into our discussion, let me quickly summarize the book. As Kevin pointed out a minute ago, the novel begins in 2010 when the narrator, Elena Greco, known as Lenu, receives a phone call from the son of an old friend saying that his mother has disappeared, leaving no traces of herself in the house. Elena recognizes this behavior as something her friend, Raffaella Carullo, whom she calls Lila and everyone else calls Lena, has always talked about doing and believes her disappearance to be a conscious decision. In the spirit of their loving but ambivalent ways towards each other, Elena breaks the promise she has made not to write about her friend and begins to put on paper everything she can remember about Lila beginning in 1950s Naples. Now, I will say, as a side note, there was a little Proustian moment to that, right? This kind of like biting into the cookie and all the memories flash back. There's kind of like a now I'm old, and now I'm going to jump all the way back to the 1950s when we're little children. Yeah. And so Lenu and Lila grow up in a poor neighborhood full of violence, corruption, and misogyny. Very few children, especially girls, receive an education beyond elementary school. The very rebellious Lila turns out to be a prodigy who has taught herself to read and write. She quickly earns the highest grades in the class, seemingly without effort. Lenu is both fascinated and intimidated by Lila, especially after Lila writes a story which Lenu feels shows real genius. Lenu begins to push herself to keep up with Lila. The paths of the two girls diverge when Lila's parents refuse to pay for further education after elementary school, while Elena's parents agree to fund Elena's studies into middle school. Lenu attends middle school and eventually high school and excels in both. With Lenu studying, Lila occupies herself with her father's shoe shop, where she begins designing new versions of shoes. She also grows very beautiful, attracting most of the neighborhood's young men. Eventually, she agrees to marry Stefano, the son of the loan shark and owner of the local grocery. Lila and Stefano marry when she is 16, throwing a large party to which they invite the whole neighborhood. The party is the climax of the novel. So that's just kind of a really general summary. And I wanted to keep it pretty general because I wanted to see if any of you have a scene that really sticks in your mind. Like, oh, I remember, Kevin mentioned a little bit earlier about the wedding scene being really powerful, but there are lots of very specific things that happen in the course of this kind of generic summary. I'm curious if anybody had something that, I really remember this one moment in the book.
Yeah, I've got one that comes to mind quickly, which is when Lila and Elena are very young. They're getting to know each other, and they're playing with their dolls outside of Don Achilles' house, right? And they drop them into like a basement grate or something, and decide that they're gonna go ask for those dolls back, which they don't get them back. But to me, like I see a lot of power in that scene because it becomes a lifelong thing where Elena is just trying to keep up with Lila and show that she can also be bold.
It's also the descent into the labyrinth with the Minotaur.
Yeah.
You could say so.
Yeah. Also, we should probably say as a caveat to the whole discussion that we are likely to butcher many pronunciations over the course of this discussion.
I think we probably
I think
will.
even to
Yeah.
the,
I think we probably already have.
I think we maybe already have.
Yeah, sure.
But even like, so I was instinctively I wanted to say Lila, but then I thought like in
Lila.
Italian, should it be Lila?
Lila and Elena.
Lila and Elena. Yeah. So anyway,
It's Helen, which is another Greek reference,
Helen of Troy. There she is.
Napoli is a strong Greek heritage.
I'm going to say
and
Lila.
her last name Greco is Greek, literally.
Yeah. Okay. The scene for me, there's plenty that I could say. I actually really liked, well, okay, I'm going to do a cheat. I'm going to mention an honorable mention then actually. So the honorable mention is when Elena stands up to the religion teacher in that moment in class, which is a cool moment because it's also tied into this, like, her constant struggle in the book to figure out, like, am I just performing for my friend or am I actually like being my own person? But the moment, I don't remember exactly where it is, when they go out of the neighborhood and they like get in trouble with that group of boys and they get like sort of rescued by the what's the other family that the two boys,
Marcelo and Michelle.
And they get like rescued by them, and there's this moment where you're like, oh my gosh, these two families hate each other, but when they leave the neighborhood, they're like bound to each other. I thought that was a very interesting moment of seeing, like, suddenly they're from the neighborhood, they're all together, and they immediately come and like defend each other.
Get the tire iron out of the trunk.
The tire iron. And I'm like, these families hate each other all book long, but you step out of the neighborhood and you got to look out for each other, and it's just instant. It's really interesting.
Shooting at each other. They're in there.
Firing fireworks.
I mean, it's like sibling rivalry. It's like you fight with your siblings, but you're still going to protect them if somebody comes after your family.
Right. If something happens, you're absolutely going to be there. And I thought that scene was a really interesting study in like the culture of the neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's in the same way that so much of this book was about escape and drawing you back into where you came from and not being able to escape, and that pattern of falling back into old patterns. And the fact that Lila's family were shoemakers, right? And they had this whole design for the shoe. And I mean, there was one point, I think, when she said something to the effect that the dreams that were in my head are now under my feet. And the focus on the hands and the feet and the shoes as being this method to try to escape this cycle of poverty, as well as education being that potential way to break out of the cycle of poverty. And then the last scene, as Kevin had mentioned in the book, and literally I think the last line of the book,
final paragraph,
was just holy wow. Like, it was just that moment when you realize, when she looks down and sees on Marcello's feet,
he's wearing the shoes.
Yeah.
And it's this, both of the main heroines realize they're trapped.
Yeah, they're stuck.
There are basically two crime families who control this town, and Lila has married into one of them, but yet the other one has been invited to the wedding against her wishes.
Yeah.
And that's the one wearing the shoes.
And he's wearing the one who was her former suitor, who she rejected.
Yes.
Walks into her
Many
wedding
times,
wearing the shoes. The final sentence of the book returns to the focus on the hands.
Yeah.
Ruining her hands is the final phrase of the novel. So there's a really interesting little, full circle moment.
So upon release, My Brilliant Friend was generally well received in what has been characterized as the seminal review of the novel. James Wood, writing for The New Yorker, called it a large, captivating, amiably peopled Bildungsroman and a beautiful and delicate tale of confluence and reversal.
Nice. I love when people use that word instead of just saying coming of age.
Bildungsroman. It's very efficient sounding.
A lot more fun.
Yeah.
It got positive press from Vogue too. The novel was praised for, quote, providing one of the more nuanced portraits of feminine friendship in recent memory, and said that the author wisely balances her memoir-like emotional authenticity with a wry sociological understanding of a society on the verge of dramatic change, which you could very much say about Sula too. But
Interesting.
maybe that's for later.
Yeah, in 2019, The Guardian ranked My Brilliant Friend the 11th best book since 2000, and they called it a powerfully intimate and unashamedly domestic.
Interesting.
Yeah, the overall series too was listed in Vulture as one of the 12 new classics since 2000, with essayist and critic Maris Kreitzman noting that Ferrante fever struck readers all over the world.
And then the one that I think Wes referenced earlier, this is the New York Times Book Review, a 2024 survey where they asked novelists, nonfiction writers, and academics. My Brilliant Friend was named the #1 book of the 21st century, which is, I think, really what put it on the map of the pod. The book review article describes the novel as encompassing ideas about art and politics, class and gender, philosophy and fate, all through a dedicated focus on the conflicted, competitive friendship between Lenu and Lila.
And the same New York Times Book Review further noted that the novel is entrenched as one of the premier examples of so-called autofiction, a category that has dominated the literature of the 21st century. And I'll say, too, another really big autofiction name that comes to mind right away is Karl Nosgard. He's also very popular, probably not as much as this, but he has like a 6-part autofiction that has gotten to be pretty
And we
popular.
have to at some point have a discussion about whether this technically is autofiction since the author is anonymous.
Yeah.
So autofiction, I get a little bit, I think about the confessional poetry of Sylvia Plath, but you think about these real confessional poets of the 1950s and 60s, and you got to know, you felt like you knew who they were through their poetry. They were very personal and intimate poetry.
Ginsberg, too.
Ginsberg as well, right?
Yeah.
And then this translates into, I hadn't heard this term necessarily until I started doing the research for this book, but it doesn't make sense that the author's almost, you feel like there's not a separation between the author and the narrator of the book, that you're actually, the author is just being a character in the book.
That's how you feel reading a lot of Norman Mailer, too. He just did it
definitely.
before it became the flavor of the day, I guess.
Yeah.
But we did. But how? Well, I know we'll talk about this, but we don't know anything about this woman. So how do we know to apply the label?
That's why
Right.
it's slightly I'm going to say controversial, but it's slightly confusing as to whether this is actually autofiction or not. Not that it necessarily matters, but it follows. It reads like autofiction.
Correct.
It does.
You feel like the author. There's not a separation between the author and the main character.
And there is some general consensus about who it is.
There is. We'll get to
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Right.
We should have tried to get her on the pod.
Yeah.
Oh, I should have
we could've
asked
just
her.
dialed her right up. But anyway, so the last volume of the series, though, The Story of the Lost Child, appears on the same list at number 80. That's the New York Times Book Review list.
And then we've also got American novelist and biographer Roxana Robinson calling Ferrante one of the great novelists of our time. So it's not short on praise.
Yeah, so really high praise for this particular novel, obviously for all four, but this one in particular. And I'm wondering if the four of us agree with all this hype or if anyone wants to push back. I mean, the best book of the 21st century has to be somewhat of an arguable claim, right? I mean, we're not all going to have the same book. So I'm just curious what you guys think now that we've read it. And I think it's safe to say that the four of us here are represent a pretty wide range of reading and reading background. To say this is the best book in the last 26 years is a pretty strong statement. And I want to say initially, not for me. No, it wasn't the best book I've read since 2000. It didn't immediately jump up to my top 10 list of all time favorite books. I'm not disappointed that I read it, but I was surprised that it's this well, this highly regarded.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, any label like that is always difficult, right? Like it's
clickbait for sure.
Yeah, when my students at film study students ask me like my favorite movie, and I'm like, it's an impossible question.
Yeah, don't you love that as a teacher? Like kids, and there's something, and we actually wrote a whole essay at one time in my AP class about why we gravitate towards top 10 lists.
Yeah,
so
why
much.
do we
like
a rank so much?
These ranking systems.
We love it.
But students throughout my whole teaching career always wanted to know, Mr. Hecker, what's your favorite book? What's your favorite Bob Dylan song? What's your favorite movie? And they were always disappointed with my answer because my answer was always, well, I don't have one favorite.
It doesn't work that way.
Right.
In my industry, I get asked, what's your favorite beer or what's your favorite whiskey? Things like that too, and I always respond that, well, what day of the week is it? Who am I with? What's the weather like?
And
where am I in terms of geography?
What are you eating?
What are we eating?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And give me a context and I can probably provide what I want and what my favorite thing in that moment would be. But void of context, it's impossible.
Yeah.
I think people like those lists and those rankings because when you value something so highly, it's like you're assimilating a little bit into your identity. It's like, this is who I am. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I'd be really curious to talk to a more European crowd. I don't know if it's a North American thing or even just an American thing because we're such a sports culture, more so than I think. I mean, obviously, there's passionate sports fans for individual sports. Like there's huge soccer fans in different regions of the world, and there's huge cricket fans in India. But the United States, you have football fans. Then football season's over. Now you have basketball. Now you switch to basketball, and then that's over, and you switch to hockey's going on when basketball's going on, and then you have baseball. There's always something.
Yeah, the mania is like for sports more than
and
it's
then
like
you always
soccer is a year-round sport
Right.
too.
Yeah.
Right, and
They just
soccer's
worship
catching,
it constantly.
I guess I'm just talking about a traditional North American United States cycle, and soccer is catching on here and growing bigger.
Yeah.
Definitely no argument there, but I'm just saying that, we always want the number one champion. We want the top 10. We want a ranking system. Who won the playoffs? Who's the champion of the league? Yeah. And I think even in like Premier League soccer, sure you have that Premier League winner, but there's not a championship game, right? Isn't there like the season ends with who's at the top of the field?
Yeah, the
top
20,
of the table.
20 teams play each other home and away over the course of the season. 3 points for win, 1 for draw, 0 for loss, and
So
the one with the most points.
Right, there's no playoff. There's
Nope.
no like 6 teams get in the playoff and then it becomes single elimination or something
Exactly
like that.
right.
So I mean, I'm wondering if our mindset is we're drawn towards lists and rankings more than people in other cultures are.
And I think that, I've thought about this before some too, specifically about how sports relate with culture. And it's interesting, the concept of rankings in numbers, but I think that there's definitely a sense of ambiguity that humans in general, we crave a conclusive decision. We crave a finite answer, right? And I think one of the principal exercises of art is to explore that is an impossible task, right? And so we are always looking, and I think Americans are even more so than many other cultures that I've personally experienced around the world. Whereas sometimes other groups, like soccer fans, your average European soccer fan is a little bit more comfortable with a draw, with a nuance that sometimes just teams tied.
Yeah.
That was a fair result,
And that's sometimes like the achievement of a season isn't winning at all.
Correct.
It's like we finished 7th, and that was a great season.
It's a European slot for us. It's the first time we've been in Europe for 20 years, something
Whereas
like
an
that.
American fan would be like, we didn't win it all, so it sucks.
Yes.
Yeah. And so,
But
And along those lines, even F1 has become like that. I mean, a lot of Americans have been introduced to F1 through the Netflix series. But F1 has 10 teams, and usually there's only 2 or 3 of those teams that are in contention to actually win.
Sure.
And the other 7 teams are just, they want to be 5th or better. They want to be, they have, every team has 2 drivers and 2 cars. And most of the teams know from the beginning of the season, they're not going to win a race.
Yeah.
One race all year, they're not going to win one race. But they want to finish in the points. And like you get points if you finish a certain place or better. Like we got points this week. And that was the success for our team.
yeah.
yeah.
So I wonder also if there are like kind of meetings at the New York Times book review editor board, or they're talking and they're arguing about if they're going to put out a top 10 list of something, and they're saying what's going to sell copies if we have a top 10 list,
because they know it will. But I don't know. Well, we'll see what others have to say. But for the question of like greatest novel of the 21st century, I feel like I came into our conversation tonight interested if we felt like this book is in the conversation with other, contemporary writers like Don DeLillo or even like Jonathan Franzen.
Pynchon.
Yeah, Pynchon, and I think even Toni Morrison, who I mention a lot.
Cormac
like,
McCarthy.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is this book in that conversation? I'm not really wondering, is it number one in the 21st century? I'm wondering, should it be in that dialogue?
Yeah, I guess my question to you, Kevin, is do you know anybody, or have you heard of anybody teaching this in high school?
No, not personally.
Do you feel like it's too advanced for high school?
No, I think it will work really well in AP Lit.
Yeah.
I'm going to score the exam next week, and I was curious to ask around. I'm wondering if people are teaching it. I think it would work well. I think a 12th grader could get something out. It's about childhood, and that's usually like
I agree. I don't think it's beyond a high schooler who's a decent reader could definitely relate to the characters, and I think the female friendship has a lot of appeal to it.
Yeah,
they would struggle to keep the family straight. I think for sure.
Bit, yeah,
that would be hard for
Well, regardless of our feelings about the book's placement on the list of greatest novels of the 21st century, and even our feelings about lists like these in general, we certainly cannot argue that the book has subsequently the series has been a tremendous success. By the end of 2016, the series at large had sold 5.5 million copies globally, including about 2 million in North America. By mid-2024, the first volume alone had sold 10 million copies. And just to remind you, my book has just broke 100.
Let's go. Okay.
You're catching up.
Yeah, I'm catching up.
Yeah. Little plug, Joe Hecker.
Only 9 million. Well, you can do the math.
He'll be there. Yeah, and as I learned tonight, HBO made a series of it and did a season for each of the 4 Neapolitan novels. And they're incredibly critically reviewed. I mean, we've got Rotten Tomato scores, but the Metacritic score, which I usually think is more interesting, is in the high 80s.
Yeah.
And it actually, I just looked at it a minute ago, but it increases throughout each of the first 3 seasons of the show. Mm. So I haven't watched any of it, but I know some of us have.
I finished yesterday the final episode of the first season, which ties in with the finale of the book itself. And yes, very well done.
Is the whole last episode like the wedding?
Yeah. Yeah. It was very faithful to the book. I mean, there's very little departure. There is some, as is always expected, but more so than many other series adaptations.
And I would say I thought they did a really good job with the set.
Yeah.
It's very much realistic of like kind of, because the book takes place in almost a low-income housing development. It's almost walled in, and they do a really good job of capturing that in the HBO series.
The tunnel, the tracks.
And just the poverty of the area. And it just feels pretty bleak, and people seem pretty impoverished.
Yeah, and filmed in Italy in Italian.
And they were very true also to the violence, the amount of violence that these girls are exposed to. And the thing that I did think was really well done is the girls don't have, even though it's a flashback, it's a flashback into the mind of Lanu when she was a girl. And she doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know about World War II at that point. She doesn't know that the Nazis had just been in Italy and that there'd been a civil war and that all these horrible things have happened. She's living a couple years after that. Mm-hmm. But all the adults have experienced that. All the adults, some of them were even part of it. Yeah. And then so the violence, the frustration, and then the crime families and the organized crime in the town, the girls don't really understand any of it. Mm-hmm. And it's really, I think the perspective that's kept that way of not giving the little girls knowledge that they wouldn't have had at that time in their life was really well done.
And I think a moment now that you were talking about that kind of now stands out of my head that I don't know that I fully realized at the time was when, what was the construction worker guy? Pascal.
Yeah.
Pascal.
Yeah.
He basically, when they were, just early teens or preteens, basically was like, you don't know about this, and started describing fascism and the things that happened in organized crime and what everything came from. And to them, kind of like you were saying, Joe, they were too close. Like they're growing up as children too close to those things that it just becomes part of the background. And it took someone to really shine a light on it. Whereas if you don't grow up close to something like that, you're kind of more aware of it.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a really cool insight.
Yeah, and they don't have the intellectual ability to really understand it either. It's just the violence is there.
Yes.
The crazy people are there. The powerful men that they can recognize as powerful men, like Don Achille, but they can't really figure out why he's a powerful man. Yeah. So they turn him into like this storybook ogre. Yeah. Which is interesting.
Well, now I need to get Max. I don't have it.
So let's talk more about exactly who. Do you want to say Elena or Ilana?
Elena.
Elena.
Like Helen. It's basically like Helen.
Gotcha. Elena Ferrante. Ferrante, you agree? Ferrante?
Ferrante, yeah.
Okay. Elena Ferrante, who she is. Ferrante is a pseudonymous Italian author who Time magazine named one of the world's 100 most influential people. Another list, right? 100 most influential people. Yet no one publicly claims to know who she is. Since publishing her first novel in 1992, Ferrante has carefully guarded her anonymity. She's never appeared publicly in the conventional literary celebrity sense and has said repeatedly that books, quote, have no need of their author, unquote. What little we know comes mostly from interviews conducted through letters and emails. Ferrante has said she was born in Naples and that she is the daughter of a seamstress and grew up alongside 3 sisters. Those origins echo throughout her fiction.
Yeah, her early novels established many of the themes that later define her reputation. Troubling Love explores a daughter's obsessive investigation into her mother's mysterious death. The Days of Abandonment portrays the psychological collapse of a woman abandoned by her husband. The Lost Daughter examined motherhood, guilt, and female identity with unsettling honesty. But it was a publication of the Neapolitan Quartet between 2011 and 2015 that transformed Ferrante into a global literary phenomenon. Across these 4 books, she charts friendship, rivalry, education, marriage, politics, feminism, class mobility, artistic ambition over more than 60 years of Italian history.
And so readers became obsessed not just with the emotion of the 4 novels, but also with the identity of the author herself. The novels feel so intimate and exact that many assume that they're just autobiographical or some sort of autofiction, like we said before. And so critics and journalists began searching for the person behind the name, and over the years, several theories emerged. Should we just clear the air? Are any of you Ferrante?
I might be.
Okay.
Which is why I'm not promoting the book as highly as you might be.
It
Well
makes
done.
sense.
Humble.
It's deflection.
Humility. Yeah.
Deflection.
Actually, when I read your books, Joe, I'm seeing the connection now.
Yeah. It's
Like,
all
very similar style.
It's like, are you Kaiser Sose?
Is that a
Usual Suspects.
Usual
right?
Suspects reference? Good.
Yeah, the search for her identity has sparked some backlash too. Many writers and critics argued that exposing her violated the very artistic freedom her anonymity was designed to protect. and that she clearly wanted. To this day, Elena Ferrante remains officially unconfirmed as a real person and continues to operate under the pseudonym.
Yeah, and that backlash was specifically robust when in 2016, an investigative journalist, Claudio Gatti, published an expose in the New York Review of Books in which he analyzed the financial and real estate records of Ferrante's Italian publishing house. He discovered that payments to translator Anita Raja surged in perfect correlation with the massive global success of these Neapolitan novels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also over the years, multiple text analysis workshops and machine learning studies have compared Ferrante's writing style against a vast database of contemporary Italian authors.
That damn AI.
I know. Yeah, you can't trust it.
Mm.
These stylistic and linguistic models consistently find an undeniable match with the work of Domenico Starnona, Raja's husband. This has led many to believe Ferrante is either Starnona, Raja, or a collaborative effort between the two. But of course, she does deny it.
Yeah, yeah. And so to add fuel to the fire, in a collection of letters and interviews, the persona of Ferrante claims a specific biographical background, claims that she grew up poor in Naples as the daughter of a seamstress. However, if Anita Raja is the true author, this background is heavily fictionalized. Raja was actually born in Naples to a German Jewish mother who fled the Holocaust and later worked as a highly educated translator and professor. Ferrante has admitted to fudging biographical details in written interviews when necessary to maintain her privacy.
Yeah, and when Gatti published his financial unmasking of Raja, it sparked massive public outrage, not directed at the author, but at the journalist. Readers and fellow writers strongly defended Ferrante's choice to remain invisible, claiming that it's important for her to avoid celebrity, especially since she's argued that once a book is written, it has no need of an author. Thus, remaining anonymous keeps the focus entirely on the art rather than public relations.
And fans note that her anonymity serves as a, quote, blank screen. It allows us a rare sense of intimacy and freedom of imagination with the text. So some also see that the anonymity is a feminist statement. The work is largely focused on female identity and breaking away from male-dominated social structures. So it could be argued that the media attempts to unmask her is another example of a real-world manifestation of men trying to control or expose a woman's private creative space.
Yeah, so I'm wondering what you guys make of this anonymity and of Ferrante's statement that once a book is written, it has no need of an author. I kind of like the second comment she makes there, that once a book's written, you can the author can be cast aside and the book can become its own thing. Yeah. In fact, there's a statement in graduate studies somewhere I heard in some critical lens, or it might have been postmodern studies or something, in which the author feels a sense of loss once their work is released because they no longer have any control over it. There's no control over how it's dealt with, how it's received, how it's interpreted. And a lot of authors have embraced that, actually. Yeah. But I'm also curious to know what you think about an author who intentionally chooses to remain anonymous.
I think I actually like it. I think I have a similar response to you, Joe. Just that the work can stand on its own. It doesn't need to be promoted a certain way or be attached to a certain personality. I think that sometimes, depending on the author, it can become more about the author than it really is about the work itself. Mm-hmm. And I think that's damaging to the book. And I also see it with actors and actresses too, or with musicians where, if someone doesn't like a choice that someone has made, they're like, oh, I'm not partaking in that art. And it's like the art is its own thing,
Yeah.
The old statement to I love the art regardless of the artist, right? You're a fan of the art, not the artist themselves. So
right. That's that cliche thing about separating the art from the artist.
Right.
I think it's necessary. And I don't know. To me,
not everybody today agrees with us on that statement.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cancellation of artists for certain behaviors.
It is. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
No, I was going to say, and sometimes that could be warranted, but sometimes it's not. And
right.
Depending on the degree and the context, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think that writing and visual art are, I'm not thinking of another one, because things like maybe more music in a modern world, but when music was performative, you had to see the artist. When acting is performed, you have to see the artist. But with a painting or with a novel, you
really
can
can just
experience the art with never having to interact with the artist. And so when she says a book doesn't need its author, I 100% agree with that statement.
Yeah.
In many ways kind of enhances our ability to relate to that book.
Well, I think it's, even to go further with what you're saying, it is true in music. You have the performer, but that's not necessarily the person who wrote the song.
Nilly.
Yeah,
Also
exactly.
true.
And but you also have the film that has the actors in it, but normally the director and the person who wrote the film and produced the film are not on the screen, maybe in a cameo here or there, but in general, you don't see them either.
But you also couldn't be anonymous as a director when you make a film because there are so many people involved in that collaborative effort
would know
that everyone would know who was actually.
At the very least, the 500 people that worked on the movie, or that is the uniqueness of, like you said, painting or writing. You can do it. You can create the work alone in your cabin.
And then that work is transportable and able to be distributed.
But we have seen people who have attempted to not talk about their art. So, for example, Bob Dylan comes to mind. He's very cryptic and hesitant to talk about any of his work. But you think about Bruce Springsteen. Yeah. Bruce Springsteen's always talking about his work. He did a whole Broadway show where he talked about his life and how his life created his songs. Yeah. So this autofiction part of Bruce Springsteen is not there with Bob Dylan, who's tried really hard to keep this separation between Bob Dylan, the artist, and Bob Dylan, the person who's not going to comment on the art.
For sure. It makes me think of that scene in Il Postino, the Postman film, where
I love that film.
Neruda, the Postman, comes by and it's like, hey, Neruda, when you wrote this line in this poem, what did you mean by that? And Neruda just pauses and says, well, if I knew a better way to say what I meant, I would have said that. Or that's what I would have written effectively. It's kind of that same thing of keeping it separate and not commenting on the work itself. Let the work be.
And I don't know if it's myth and legend or not, but there's supposed to be something very similar that Faulkner said when somebody asked Faulkner what he meant in one of his books, and he's like, "Well, it's in the book. Just read it." Yeah. And but he Faulkner was known for not willing. He wasn't willing to enter the realm of dissecting his work.
Sure. Penchon is notoriously secretive too, which I think we've discussed on the pod. Just doesn't do interviews. There are maybe 2 or 3 pictures of him circulating the internet.
I think it's, to the broad question, I think it's kind of like a badass move because when the author is really visible, especially in Western American culture, it's usually a business move, right? You do a book tour and you appear in places and do public readings and you
build a platform.
You do most of this to drive sales. Yeah. So I feel like there's something kind of badass about just being like, I wrote the book and I'm out. To me, if you like it, read it. Yeah.
So I totally agree with you. I think it is if the work is truly good and great, it's the best thing an author could do. Yeah. If it's not, it's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah. And then
because it's kind of pretentious, and when you do, you know what I'm saying.
Well, but you're assuming that really, really good work will rise to the top, regardless of the author promoting it or anybody promoting it. And I'm not sure that's completely true in today's world.
Not saying that at all.
Oh, well, it sounds like that's what.
No, the decision to be anonymous or not.
Oh, but you can still have a public persona of the author who's the pseudonym.
To a degree, no. I guess what I'm saying is that decision. If the book isn't, you have to make that decision when you publish the book. You have no idea if this book is going to sell well or be critically acclaimed or not. Yeah. It's true of any art when it's released, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're making that decision and it's a terrible book, it's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But if you take your name off it and it becomes this international bestseller, the number 1 on this list of the 21st century, then it's that is the coolest thing you possibly could have done.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that she initially wanted to remain anonymous just because she was shy. But that was she was beginning her career in 1992. So by the time she got to these books and was more established, she could have probably made more off of them if she put herself out there, but she chose not to.
And do we agree that it's her right to maintain her privacy, and that these exposés and investigative reporters who are trying to figure out who she is should be backing off?
I think especially looking at like financial stuff seems a little bit invasive. I think if you're just looking at the writing style and you want to do some sleuthing, that's your right. But to dig into somebody's financial transactions to do something that doesn't need to be done at all.
Follow the money, right? Follow the money.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
I feel like that is invasive.
That's what I was going to say. The same thing. I think it's perfectly fine for her to desire that and pursue it. But I also think readers have a right to wonder and ponder and speculate. But I think there is a murky line somewhere there where it's like, if you want to read it and talk to your friends about who you think it is, fine. But like the expose is a bit much.
Elena, we're inviting you to the pod formally.
All right.
And come on down.
And I'm sure he, or they are listening, right?
Absolutely.
Wait, but you said, Wes, did we already cover who you have heard is maybe
Anita?
The identity?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder if there are weird ones out there where people think it's like Trump or something.
Or like the odd Shakespeare ones where people think an alien landed.
Oh,
Stuff, right?
Yeah.
So let's lighten the mood a little bit here. So in lieu of a quiz this week or this month, I thought it'd be fun to explore what we know about other anonymous artists. So Kevin, why don't you tell us about an anonymous artist?
Okay, I'm happy to say that I do know this name.
Yeah.
But I don't know much about this. So there's a visual artist called Banksy, who's maybe the most famous street artist. And while who Banksy actually is officially unconfirmed, there's heavy speculation that it's Bristol artist Robin Gunningham, though some theorize that Banksy is a collective led by Robert Del Naja, who is the only consistent member of the trip-hop band Massive Attack. I just love the thought that someone out there is like, Massive Attack. Trip-hop, by the way, if you're wondering, it's a fusion of hip-hop and electronica, defined by slow...
Boomer.
I know, I'm like, what is trip-hop? Slow atmospheric beats and a dark moody sound. I do actually think that Joe and I have a few former students who consider themselves trip hop artists. I'm not going to name names.
Or this other thing they taught me was called, I think, shoegaze.
Oh yeah.
Which is another form of this kind of chilling out music rather than dancing music.
Yeah.
Which is what trip hop has been defined as.
Okay.
Well, this book is about shoes, so
there you go.
There is a lot of gazing at shoes. Yeah, you could call it a shoegaze novel.
True.
Another anonymous visual artist is the French urban artist who glues ceramic tile mosaics of 1970s video game characters in major global cities. He is known as Invader. I have not heard of him. And although he does grant interviews, he wears masks during the interviews and operates entirely under the radar.
And then there's Burial, a highly influential electronic dubstep producer who was forced to reveal his identity, William Bevan, when a Mercury Prize nomination sparked an intense media hunt, prompting him to post a selfie online in 2008 to end the chase.
All right, and don't forget about the electronic music pioneers Daft Punk, whose identities are known today, but they wore robot helmets for decades to redirect focus from their personal lives onto their music and visual art.
Some might say around the world.
Yeah. I knew a guy growing up, said teenager, I'm positive he was lying, but he was so sure, or at least he wanted everyone to believe, he had an uncle in Daft Punk. I heard this over and over again.
Isn't it the same concept? Isn't there Marshmallow? Is that the more contemporary version? Who wears the marshmallow head? And
I don't know that.
It's a similar. It's like the heir to Daft Punk.
Okay.
But anyway, speaking of music, there's also The Residents, an avant-garde American art rock collective active since the 70s, and they perform wearing tuxedos, top hats, and round globes on their head that are shaped and painted to look like single eyeballs. They've managed to keep their real name secret for over 50 years.
And of course, there are many, many professional wrestlers who have never officially revealed their identities. This happens especially within the culture of Mexican pro wrestling, where a character's mask is considered sacred. We see that in Nacho Libre a little bit.
Right?
was
Totally a
wondering
Nacho
if-
Libre, yeah.
I thought it would
Yeah.
have to enter the conversation eventually.
And in terms of La Lucha Libre in Mexico, it's funny because like a wrestler's true name and face, they're legally protected secrets. And while internet sleuths occasionally uncover Nacho Libre's real name through trademark filings or old public records, several elite wrestlers have successfully maintained absolute anonymity by never unmasking on television, in public, or on social media.
The most legendary example is El Santo, the silver masked man. For nearly 50 years, from the 30s to the 80s, he never removed his mask in front of fans, peers, or cameras. He even traveled on separate flights from his crew, so customs agents wouldn't see his face in front of colleagues. Days before his death in 1984, he briefly lifted his mask on a live Mexican talk show to say a final goodbye to his fans.
This reminds me when I was in high school on spring break trips, I went down twice to like help with the mission group of building houses for homeless people on the Mexican border. And I was a big high school wrestler. Like, that was my big sport. And I was talking to the little local kids, and one of them, and I said, "Oh yeah, so I love La Lucha Libre because like we say like wrestling," and they're like, "Oh yeah, so what's your name?"
Yeah. And you're like,
And I was very
Scott?
confused. My Spanish was not very good. I'm like, it's like, no, what's your wrestling name? And I'm like,
Right.
oh, because they were picturing me wearing a mask and like doing all this stuff. Like,
Did you come up with one while you were down there?
I should have. I really should have.
Yeah, there's I mean, we don't have to get too far down the rabbit hole here, but there's a great South Park episode about
Yes,
this,
yes.
where they consider regular wrestling to be something rather offensive. We won't go into it here. And then only professional wrestling is what they consider to be wrestling.
The real thing.
All right. So anyway, My Brilliant Friend has become not just a literary phenomenon, but it's also a subject of serious academic study at many campuses, including UC Berkeley, which has really pushed this book hard. And I just wanted to say before we go further here with diving into what UC Berkeley has done with this book, that this is the way, in my opinion, books get propelled to that higher level. When colleges, a humanities department in a certain college will decide to champion a book and start writing about it, building critiques about it, maybe having conferences over it. You see, and then they form like societies around the authors. There's a Cormac McCarthy Society and things like that. You know, when in it to me, it's a potential something I'm a little bit afraid of as the humanities are suffering funding and people aren't necessarily seeing a value in studying the humanities. So the colleges are minimizing those departments. I'm wondering if that's going to hurt the academic ability to kind of promote things that we might consider serious literary fiction.
Yeah, I kind of share your fear there, especially when we're in a current world, especially in our country, of fearing elites and thinking that anyone who's thinking and interacting with something and then defunding and focusing on STEM sort of stuff.
Yeah. So if we're just going to allow the publisher houses and the amount of book sales to determine the value of a book, I think that's that's going to allow us to, or cause us to miss a lot of important things.
Yeah, and it's kind of that slippery slope to that documentary film that came out by Mike Judge years ago called Idiocracy.
Yeah,
oh, yes.
yeah.
The documentary,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, too, I'm really grateful to be part of this group because so many guys don't read at all. Or if they do read, they read finance books, they read, history,
Biography.
they read biography, right?
How to be a man.
Sure, some of that too. But like
There's
fiction,
literally a book called that, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
This made the
The
rounds.
Man in
and-
Me.
Yeah, there you go. Tobias Finke.
Yes.
Yeah. the man inside me.
Man inside me. I'm sorry. I
I forgot about that seminal.
The best scene is when he blew
absolutely seminal
himself.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah, seminal is the right word.
Yeah.
So Wes, tell us about what's going on at Berkeley.
Yes, at Berkeley, professors in Italian studies, comparative literature, and classical studies are now using the Neapolitan novels in courses that examine language, class, gender, and narrative form. They claim that Ferrante's work bridges the personal and the political. It portrays a violent patriarchal and class stratified society while also focusing on intimate questions of identity, ambition, and female friendship, which I would, reading that here, I would say that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And many academics say that the emotional intensity and psychological precision of the book make it accessible to students while still offering depth of theory and analysis. And I think that's that's for Joe and I as and Scott's been a teacher too. That's what you're looking for, right? You're looking for a book that has style, depth, but readability and an ability to connect. And I feel like 100% this book could be that. It could do those things in a classroom.
Yeah, in many ways, this book is doing the thing that very few books ever do, which is it's achieved a large popular success, but also academic and critical acclaim. And you don't see that very often. Yeah, that's a really hard line to walk.
To me, it's a lot harder than being really pretentious, which is the problem that I personally have with a lot of sort of the postmodern stuff, is it's not accessible. And
I mean, Arno Schmidt, for example, we read, what was that book we read?
School for
I've
Atheists.
blocked it out
for
of my
Atheists,
memory
right.
entirely.
I mean,
there's no
doubt in my mind that in many ways this guy is doing a high level art form that's beyond my ability to imagine ever doing. I was actually thinking with My Brilliant Friend, this is much better than my writing, but it felt like I could aspire to this writing. Mm-hmm. There wasn't something there that I'm like, oh, I could never learn to do that, to write a novel that works this way. But when we read Arno Schmidt, I'm like, no, I can't.
I could not do that.
I could not do that. I couldn't.
But I would challenge that Arno Schmidt could not do this.
Well, right. I agree completely.
Yeah,
right,
different skill set.
One that comes to mind though for me that had both popular success and a lot of academic success.
No, don't do it, Wes.
Infinite Jest, man.
Oh, I thought you were going for a Colson Whitehead.
Oh, no, I wasn't. I was saying something serious this time.
All right. Infinite Jest.
And it goes all the way back to Huck Finn did that as well.
Yeah.
Huck Finn was successful as a popular novel, and it was actually controversial for reasons that had nothing to do with the dealings with a African American runaway slave. Mm-hmm. It was more about the language that people had objected to. And then it became really critically acclaimed as well.
Yeah. Let the record show I chose Arno Schmidt and I chose this too. So I'm not only pretentious.
You're not an elitist, right?
Only sometimes.
All right. So with all this in mind, I did some research on some of the themes that tend to be discussed on academic in academic circles and classrooms around the book. And so I asked each of you to kind of explore one of those themes, and then we'll comment on it as it occurs to us too.
Yeah, for sure. And one of those ideas is unstable memory and narration. And so the story is told by Elena Greco as an adult reconstructing her childhood. And it creates a built-in question. How reliable is memory? And you know me, I'm always questioning the reliability of the narrator.
That's your favorite question.
That is my soapbox, right?
Yeah.
And what gets shaped, distorted, or selected, we don't really know. And so this makes it useful for theories of narration, subjectivity, and autobiographical fiction, and also makes the anonymity of the author that much more interesting.
Yeah. And, I was thinking throughout the book, to get to the story itself, but I think Elena, she almost never acknowledges the possibility that she's misremembering, which is, did we read, what's the Ishiguro, Never Let Me Go? Did we read Never Let Me Go?
We read that.
We did.
Yeah, so Kathy in Never Let Me Go is constantly admitting that it might not be quite the way it went.
Sure.
I feel like Elena doesn't do that, but what she does do is she pretty consistently admits that her the emotional complexities might be interfering with her perception.
Yeah.
So I this question is it feels relevant to me. She seems to believe in the certainty of her memory, but she also acknowledges the bias of her emotions. And I don't know where that leaves us as readers. Is she presenting this in a fair and honest way? I don't know.
I think the fact that she doesn't constantly question herself, at least for me, when I read that, I do see this more as autofiction because we tend to trust our own memories maybe more than we should sometimes. And I think sometimes the constant questioning of the narrator is almost more of a literary tactic. And that if you were actually recalling your past life, you've spent so many years thinking through these things that you do feel it's the way it happened, whether or not that's true.
Yeah, and I think there's a degree too where whether the factual events of this history are correct or not is a separate question. Sure. I think the author or the narrator, whether they're the same person or not, they are genuine. I don't think there's room to really puncture the reliability in terms of the author's experience.
Totally agree with that. Yeah.
Whereas other famous first persons, you can totally, this author, this narrator is not being genuine.
Right.
Yeah. Right. There's not an attempt to deceive us.
Correct.
But the memory could be unstable or inaccurate.
Yeah,
right?
just like with any of our memories, right?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I've done some reading on memory, and basically the more times that you remember a specific moment, so a moment from your childhood or something, every time you remember it, you're basically laying a new memory on top of that old memory, and you're distorting it a little bit more. So actually in research, it's been determined that the more times you remember the same event, the more distorted it becomes.
Yeah.
Right.
You keep recalling a version of it. Yeah.
The lens I might want to explore doing a second reading of this book, and maybe I'll keep attention to this as reading the second, third, and fourth, is Elena does sort of self-doubt as the character in her own memory. She's kind of downplaying her own academics and her own stardom.
Yeah. And
to me, but then she's also credited by Lila as being able to tell other people what they want to hear.
Yeah. She receives as an insult.
Exactly.
Right?
To make them like her more.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that is a technique that she is doing in the storytelling. And that would be kind of an interesting, subtle lens to sort of apply retroactively on a second or a third reading.
But she's also playing us in the way that,
to a degree.
That Lila recognizes she's very good at.
Exactly right.
Yeah. That is interesting because because she has so many self-doubts about whether or not she's also an intelligent person, it has made me think, there's some people who just get really good at school. Right. Yeah. They're not actually that intelligent, but they've learned how to do school very well. So they graduate high school with a 4.0, right? But I think we see, and I don't.
The opposite is also true, to be fair. That
right.
there are very intelligent people who aren't good schoolers.
Right.
And I think that's Lila and Elena, right? Lila is just naturally good at learning and goes and teaches herself Latin and Greek and various other things that are going on. And she's not even in school anymore.
Yeah.
And Lanu's working really hard to be the top of her class. But it's not, and we've seen, Kevin and I have seen this all the time with some of the most gifted students I've ever had are not in any advanced classes, and they sit in the back of the room, and I'm like, man, this person's really gets things, but just has no interest in being like the academic student in competing for the 4.0 or things like that.
And that's how I felt too, because like I was a good student, and I was known for being a good student. People thought I was probably smarter than I actually was. And I had some friends, one friend in particular in college I can think of who was just so smart. I mean, everything, she would understand it so quickly and do phenomenally in her classes just because she had an almost intuitive understanding of things that weren't really intuitive at all.
And that's a cool element of the novel too. Yeah. The dynamic between Lila and Elena is so much so that you assume that the brilliant friend of the title actually refers to Lila, but it's actually something Lila says to her.
And now that you mention it, I didn't mention this earlier in the pod, but that was my favorite scene.
And it was cool
when that flips, ironically, because you're always assuming as you're reading the book that Lanu thinks that Lila is the brilliant friend, and it's reversed.
I wanted to make a clarification there that so when I saw the Mimica Genial, right? It was like the Italian title. And you can translate geniale or whatever the Italian is. But what triggered my immediate response is because in Spanish, genial is like cool. It's fun. So like the word brilliant, I think, is an amazing translation and far more interesting if you look at it from a British perspective, the way the Brits use the word brilliant. It can apply equally to like, yeah, that's kind of like ingenious or really smart. Whereas Americans almost exclusively use it in that sense. In fact, if you remember a few years ago when Guinness had that whole ad campaign about brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
And they're saying brilliant to everything.
Yeah.
But
Brilliant.
Brits use the word brilliant as just like, oh, that's really cool. Oh, cool. Good job, guy. You know, like brilliant, sweet. Like, oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
They use it in so many different contexts. And I know in Spanish, at least, genial has that kind of rhythm to it. I don't know personally if Italian has that subtext. And that would, so our Italian listeners,
Please let us
comment.
know.
Let us know
Yes,
on the pod.
our many
Italian.
We are more
comments.
popular in Germany, and Germany,
you go.
it had done some nasty things to Italy during this time, so we probably might not get a lot of.
Maybe
I was
German
thinking that the whole
listeners.
while reading the whole book, and like, how does that is that a good translation or is that not a good translation? And like, if you're coming to it from a British perspective versus American, it's interesting nuance.
Yeah.
When you look at the different titles of the books, like I said, I'm on the third one now. I feel like every title works in a couple different ways, which I think is really cool. Like with this one, I think the brilliant friend could be both. Right? I know explicitly Leela does call Elena, "You're my brilliant friend." Yeah, but it goes both ways, right? And so the titles, you know, when I saw like the titles of the books and the covers initially, I thought they were kind of off-putting.
Can we talk about that cover?
The cover
It's weird.
It's bad.
Look
They're
it
all
up.
bad.
If you're listening, look it up.
I bought the digital version to avoid the cover.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about class. It's another element of the book that gets discussed. So the novel's not just about the friendship between these two girls. It's about poverty and social hierarchy and how they kind of shape the decisions and choices you have. So education, language, marriage, even bodily safety, they're all class coded. And we see that in some really, really powerful scenes in this book. So it makes it useful for a Marxist or a sociological reading of the novel. So yeah, thoughts about the presence of class and the wandering out of the neighborhood. And
yeah, let me jump in there because I think it's really interesting. Again, I touched on this earlier, that the author chooses to keep the perspective of the narrator based on the age that the narrator is at the time that they're understanding the scene or they're experiencing the scene. And so the two little girls don't necessarily know anything about class or poverty or wealth. They get to learn a little bit more as they go on. For example, when I was a kid, I never thought, are we wealthy or are we not wealthy? Are we poor? Are we, I just thought we were like most of the people we lived with, and everybody was kind of like that way.
yeah,
And then gradually you become more sophisticated and you realize how the world actually is. And that I was actually living in a pretty depressed area of Southern Ohio. But I didn't realize it at the time. It seemed like we had what all my friends had, and so everybody was about the same.
Yeah, it's the contrast that stands out.
Yeah, definitely.
which is, true to the book, right? Those moments of clarity are really only, in two broad categories. One, when they leave the neighborhood and they become really aware that there's another group of people. And then the other for Elena is like when she starts to see Leela change, when she starts to see Leela become the betrothed of this, quote, wealthy, and starts to realize, oh, she's starting to lean into this. I'm going to wear fancy clothes and carry nice.
She's not going to escape the labyrinth.
Right. She's going to stay and be queen of a small world.
Where is our Ariadne's thread?
And then there's also the continuous pressure. Can we afford to spend money for this education? Right. And will that be worth it? Is there any value in spending money for our daughters to be educated? And I don't know if I think it's partially because they're girls that the parents are more hesitant to spend the money, but it's also just about what's the payoff. What's
exactly
what will it do for the family?
To me, the novel is all about escape and means for escaping that labyrinth, that system, that closed in place, right? And that education is a means for escape, but the parents see it as being futile. They never escaped. Why should the kids escape? No one they're seeing around them is escaping.
And they're skeptical of education and of,
Absolutely.
the kind of the expert or the intellectual.
Because if they do leave, they're no longer part of their world.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a fear of that unknown, like we all have. It's what's on Odysseus's horizon. You know?
Oh, I mean, Elena feels it so powerfully in that wedding scene when her mother exerts like this physical control. It's just, those last 70 pages, because that's when she really starts thinking, I am literally being physically restrained.
Yeah.
And how in the hell am I going to get out of here? Yeah. And it becomes,
To me, the most interesting aspect of the class's structures that existed here was linguistic. Yeah. And I think we were talking a little bit about before we turned the podcast equipment on, and she was writing this book in Italian, but would always make a reference to set it in slang or jargon or these kind of things, referring to the Neapolitan language, which was a separate language within the region of Napoli. And that is seen as being low class. And this is like code switching. So we have this in any linguistic group where we have social structures often defined by the language you choose to use. And in this particular place, you have the street language of the Neapolitan language, what people speak on the streets of Napoli. And you have this more nationalistic, quote unquote, perceived as being pure Italian that people would switch into to relate. Yes.
They call it like high Italian sometimes.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. And so that's the language of academics. That's the language of school. That is the language of when you leave your poor neighborhood, you speak in Italian and you speak proper. And can you speak it well or not defines your social class. Then there's the elite Latin, which all the other languages came from. It's far more complex. You have to really study it, really need it, and very few people can kind of master that as an escape. So it's sort of like that. Now, of course, from a linguistic perspective, none of them have any inherent greater value than the other. It's just how we perceive them and how we rank and categorize people.
Right.
Also clothing, shoes. Yeah. People judge by shoes.
Elena's really self-conscious about the ratty dress.
And she has when she goes to is it Ischia?
Yeah.
She has a bathing suit that's made for her.
Yeah, that's made.
Even the lady there was like, no, that's old fashioned.
Yeah,
we're going to remake it for her.
Right. Yeah. Let me make you one.
And the amount of money they spend on the clothes for the wedding. I mean, there's all these little glimpses.
Everybody's borrowing money to get the clothes for the wedding.
Yeah.
Right. But the shoes, go back to the shoes, because when Leela's designing the shoes, her father is like, no, those shoes aren't the kind of shoes we sell here. We sell like working class shoes. These are like, there's something different than they're too stylish or too chic. Or
it's funny. So like when this is something too, it's like Americans, we have this almost beautiful, innocent naivete about class structure because we don't have like an inherent simple class system in place. But a lot of the more old world countries do, And so when I was living down in Chile, I remember a newly arrived American asking a friend, well, how do you just tell if someone's of a lower class or a higher class? And the person, well, look at their shoes. You can just tell by the way they're dressed. You can tell by their clothes. Yeah. Look at their shoes.
Yeah, this is still true today when you see especially European tourists that come through America. They always have stylistic footwear. And when I've traveled to Europe on school trips, one of the things people are always telling us, don't wear tennis shoes. Yeah. All Americans just wear tennis shoes everywhere. And that's not the way it is in Europe. You don't wear these athletic shoes when you're walking down the street.
Which I think all of this it felt like it was some sort of powerful metaphor in the novel that the Cerullo children wanted to sell shoes and the father couldn't really conceive of anything beyond repairing. Remember, his shop is a repair shop. Correct. And the idea of selling new shoes felt like
that shoe that they could make, that they knew how to make as well as anyone. And this is that Marxist structure where you have the means of production is with the masses to bring it up to the the bourgeois, these kind of things. So the shoe has to escape the neighborhood.
Yeah,
and they literally have to make a deal with the mob to get the shoe to escape the neighborhood. And the shoe escaping the neighborhood is key for them to escape the neighborhood.
Yeah, today they would be artisans at the Arts and Crafts Festival, with their tents selling their handmade shoes that they know how to make and are really cool. Yeah. Wes, tell us about what else is being discussed in the academic world here.
Yeah. So other people are focusing on discussions around gender and power.
Which I think connects to what we were just talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Elena and Leela grow up in a world where female ambition is constrained by violence, marriage expectations, and economic dependence. The novel invites feminist analysis of agency, constraint, and internalized power structures. What do we have to say about this?
I think we can't get away from looking at the fact that these two girls are just constantly trying to sidestep the system. I mean, Leela's like the classic, or Lila's like Leela's the classic rebel, right? She's just rebellious. But then she decides to marry,
right?
Which I thought was odd. I didn't feel like there was any pressure from her family that she get married. Did anybody else feel that? Did you feel that?
Well, there was tons of pressure to marry to Marcello.
Yeah.
Like, they were basically like,
but that's
you'll
because
ruin the family.
She was dating him.
No, she wasn't.
I mean, he was coming around, though.
He was courting her.
He was
trying.
Right. But, okay, so you're saying they were expecting her at 16.
I think
it was fine for a 16-year-old person to get married at this time.
I think the messaging she received from her parents was like, as a young girl, the best thing you can do for this family is to marry that kid.
So to me, this is a really interesting dynamic, because from Leela's perspective, she saw the relationship with Stefano as being very different from the relationship with Marcello, and very different from the way her family would have perceived it. Mm-hmm. So her family sees there are two families, literally in their little town, in their little suburb, whatever you want to call it. There are two families. There's Stefano's family, and there's Marcello's family.
Yeah, two families that have power
centers,
right?
that have kind of
wealth,
that have wealth, right? Yeah. And so the echelon that the family knows is living within the neighborhood. And if you marry into one of those two families, you've achieved
You're set.
all there is in life.
Yeah.
You never have to worry about money. You're living within it, but you're not escaping the community. Right. You are at the upper tier of our community, and us as a middle to lower level shoemaker, that is an amazing achievement. That is the life's ambition, right?
Yeah. But doesn't Leela believe that she's chosen the lesser of the two evils? And then
I think she does.
Then the last scene, she realizes, oh wait, they're the same.
They're the same.
They're the same level of corruption.
No,
That's how
I see it as slightly different.
Okay, yeah.
I see it as that she sees it as her actual opportunity for escape, because she sees Stefano as being more genuine, and she sees Marcello as being full of shit.
Yeah.
And so she doesn't trust anything. So that's not going to do anything, because the limit of Marcello is living within the neighborhood. Stefano is promising the escape of the shoe. Stefano is promising.
But he lies. But he's
he
not.
Does.
That's what I'm saying. She realizes
and that
she's
is
been
why
deceived
the final,
at the end.
Yes, that is why the final scene is so powerful, because she has been deceived. They're the same thing. She is still trapped. She saw Stefano as being her only out. She was not allowed to go to school. That was a means for escape that she was banking on. That was closed down. Then it became about the factory.
I mean, we have to mention that her father threw her out of a window and broke her arm as a way to say, I'm not paying for you to go to middle school.
Yeah.
Which, getting back to the gender power thing, I mean, some of these adult men do horrible things, including Donato, like sexually abusing Elena, and on the vacation island or whatever, which is like that.
The mentally unstable widow.
Yes. So I'm like, you got these men. I mean, it's a cultural thing. They do what they want.
And they do what they want. Attack each other. The men attack each other violently as well.
Right.
You know,
Donato is such a good guy.
Oh my God.
Grabbing Anna from the street,
which is interesting, because you do. Again, through the perspective of our narrator, you do sort of think like, God, why does Nino hate his father so much? He does seem like this jovial, and then of course the scene when he like visits her in the middle of the night in her bed, and you're like, okay, true colors are showing, and
Yeah, that was uncomfortable.
Yeah, deeply disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's almost like when we talk about power is also connected to something that I believe we have started to change in our culture, at least the American culture. I'm not sure, I can't speak for other European cultures, but the idea of like this defending your honor. Now, I know in some places honor killings and things are still happening and mostly, condemned by Americans, but this idea that somebody has offended or somehow dishonored me, so I have to go on the street and like actually try to beat them up, even if I clearly am going to get this shit kicked out of me.
Very Shakespearean sort
Yeah.
of defense,
Just
of
like
family
our
honor. Yeah.
last book had a duel in it, did it not?
A duel.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it did.
Gosh, if we lived that way, I would have had to kill Joe like 25 times
Well,
by
no,
now.
I mean, what would have happened is the same thing. Like you would have had to fight me, but you would have lost. But you would have had to do it because you.
I would have had to.
Right.
I would have, every time you insulted me, I would have had to.
Right, and then I'd leave you on the street bleeding. And, people,
Once
anyway.
Joe does a sound check, Kevin throws the gauntlet down.
Exactly.
Yeah, every time it would. I mean, I know we're going to talk about violence. Maybe we should jump to it, but I mean, it is a crazy. Yeah. The presence of this, like, you've insulted my sister, father, friend, mother. Like, we must react with violence. It's just it's a wild culture.
Yeah.
All right. So there's also the idea of this double figure friendship structure. So this friendship, and I think this is one of the things that a lot of readers connect strongly with, like this odd friendship between Elena and Leela. They're almost like opposites, but sometimes that binary gets deconstructed in their friendship. So they, sometimes they're student, non-student, but then the non-student is teaching the student. Sometimes they're creator and observer, and then that flips back and forth. With Leela making the shoes, she's being a creator. She writes the book, she's being a creator. But she's not in school anymore. So you have this interesting, and the two are friends, but there's a lot of friction in that friendship.
Yeah.
And I
a lot
think
of competition.
Yeah, and I think that friendship resonates to be true for a lot of people can connect to that.
Yeah, and this is the element where I thought so much of Sula by Toni Morrison, where you get to the end of that novel and start thinking like maybe Nell and Sula, these two young girls, are sort of like they form a whole. They're two parts of a whole. And I don't mean it in maybe a literal sense, but you do have a feeling here that like Leela and Elena maybe they fit together as like a singular whole, and they have these things that accentuate things about the other. I don't know. Remember the scene where she's like bathing to get ready for the wedding? That is such an interesting little moment of like the tension of their friendship and
intimacy and tension at the same time.
Yeah, and I want to comment on that because I really appreciated the fact that you had a book that had two women who were friends and intimately friendly, but not sexually attracted to each other.
Yeah.
It seems like in so many HBO series and various other things that it's always going to turn that into some kind of lesbian relationship. And I really appreciated the fact that the novel didn't go there.
There was like a tiny moment in that scene though.
But it was kind of more like appreciating the other person's beauty.
Yeah.
But I don't think that either of them are physically attracted.
It doesn't.
To the other,
it doesn't seem
in a sexual way, in a truly sexual
Unless
way.
the HBO show took it in a different
It did
direction.
not, and they actually did a really interesting job with that scene, particularly. But that would also be an interesting, subtle lens to read through this book. Is a homoerotic lens, and especially with the male characters.
Oh yeah, with all these
that goes,
toxically masculine competing.
So
that's always something that you wonder about these hyper masculine characters.
Pasquale is
and even Nino's dad, Domenico, he was seen as a bit feminine by the other men in the neighborhood and kind of but was the ultimate predator.
Is Mr. Still your girl?
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah,
but it's often the people who are overcompensating and being the most masculine. Who are the ones that maybe are suspect. But okay, let's talk about one final thing that people are a criticism So Scott, you were going to jump in here.
Yeah. So one of the most discussed ideas is authorship and self-creation. So because Ferrante herself is anonymous, and because Elena becomes a writer by narrating Leela's life, the novel consistently asks, who gets the author a life? So that overlaps with questions in narratology and postmodern theory about authorship and identity. The novel treats storytelling itself as unstable, and it blurs the boundary between who lives a life and who gives that life meaning by narrating it. In narratology, the focus is on the fact that My Brilliant Friend is told by an adult Elena Greco, reconstructing her past. That creates a layered structure. There's the experiencing self, young Elena, living events in real time, and the narrative self, older Elena, shaping those events into a coherent story. The narratology raises the questions like, what gets left out? What gets emphasized only in hindsight? Is the story discovering meaning or manufacturing it? In postmodern theory, authorship is no longer seen as a stable authority that guarantees meaning. Instead, it's like meaning that's produced through language, memory, and interpretation.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff to me. I mean, I like the idea that we don't even consider what was left out. I mean, you were talking about 365 days of a year for this book. The girls are 16 by the end of the book, and maybe there are 8 when it opens, just to throw a number out there.
Kindergarten,
whatever.
Yeah.
So let's say so there's at least 10 years.
Yeah.
There's at least a 10-year span of 365 days. We're only seeing a very, very small sliver of that time. Yeah. So what happened in all that other time that the author chose not to tell us about?
As Lisa Simpson said, you have to listen to the notes that are not played.
Okay. Thank you.
Nice.
I will say that sort of, I don't want to say rushing, but just going very quickly through certain events and years continues on in the book without spoiling too much. When she talks about her college experience, it's like over in a couple of pages, all 4 years. So very selective.
Yeah, we have 2 different styles of writing. So I'm thinking of like Richard Ford. Richard Ford has 4 books that are part of a series. There's the sports writer, and then it becomes Independence Day,
Lay of the Land,
and then something about the one I read recently took place on Valentine's Day weekend. I forget the name of the book.
Yeah,
but they all follow the same character, and the books are so dense. And they take place over 3 days, and it takes you more than 3 days to read about these 3 days.
One
like
is Easter weekend.
And it's like Ulysses; it's a single day.
Right, it's a single day, so it's trying to capture every moment of that day. I'm thinking of Catcher in the Rye. It's basically a long weekend, but it doesn't feel like it when you're reading it. It feels like it's more time has elapsed in that. But this book, we have 10 years. And the author has only chosen to tell us certain moments of those 10 years.
So 10 years like in the Iliad and 10 years like in the Odyssey.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it's not a long book either.
It's not a particularly long book.
Pages, yeah.
Which makes it more epic as opposed to more finite.
And I'm thinking, I know there are books like this in which the same story is told again by a different author. In fact, I think the Gilead series. Gilead has follow-up books where the same story is told by different characters.
Yeah.
Ooh,
and my mom actually read the rest of them.
Did she? Okay.
Yeah, she liked the first one so much.
So I think that's interesting, where you're getting a different perspective of the same story. Just like the 4 of us, we used to do this in my class all the time. We talk about, we'll write a few minutes about what you thought just happened in class today, and everybody has different things that they were paying attention to and focusing on.
There's also the possibility that, she's looking back for some of this nearly 60 years, right? And so there's probably just a lot that she doesn't remember at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I think being quite a bit younger than she is at the time this begins, I think back to my earlier years, 6, 7, 8. There's not that much I remember. There's not that much I have to say.
Yeah.
And as narratology argues, there's the adult narrator who's trying to construct a story.
Right.
And then there's the child who's experiencing these events.
Well, and I think at one point, Elena had mentioned something about Leela's writing. I think it was about the article that she edited or something.
It's about the Blue Fairy. the story
maybe
she
it was
wrote.
about the Blue Ferrante.
Oh,
but
yeah,
it was
her novel.
something.
No, there was another thing she wrote.
where
right?
she edited the story that she was
Yeah,
going to
and
submit
she's
about
like-
challenging the religion teaching.
That's exactly
That
right.
didn't end up
But
getting
the
published.
The Elena wrote, right?
She was
Yeah.
talking.
But Leela edited it.
Right.
Yeah, and I forget the exact moment, but she described her narration as something about being
It was genuine. It was like her.
Genuine.
It was like her own words, but they were told really in a very
Authentic.
eloquent
Yeah.
way.
elegant
Right?
in a way that brought you into the experience, right? And free of artifice.
Yeah.
And I don't know that word was used, but that was sort of the concept, that it was free of literary constructions, free of artifice.
Yeah.
And something like a Richard Ford, something like a lot of the postmodernism, you are reading this literary work, and that's, I think, to a degree of what I maybe flippantly called pretension earlier, and that's probably not a fair statement completely, but this book is not that. And I think that's what's so impressive about it, is the consistency of that narratology, that narrative effort is so consistent.
Yeah.
It is so deeply consistent. And because this is the way someone would actually tell a real story.
Right.
Yeah, it makes Elena self-conscious about the letters she wrote from Ischia,
Yeah.
where she thinks how embarrassing it was to like over dramatize when she read Leela's narrative
Right.
voice, and it was so much more authentic.
And I think too, Scott, what you're talking to that point, like Bel Canto does this as well, but I feel like this does it so much better, right?
Feels artificial.
When I was reading Bel Canto, the story on paper sounds more exciting, right? And I did enjoy it. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy the book, but it didn't really pull me along as much, even though it's supposed to be more exciting. Yeah. This is like day to day.
So you're saying like, Peruvians invading a house and taking over hostages with this. It's more exciting than, two girls grow up and one goes to school and one makes shoes and gets married.
Right.
That's
like
the plot.
like the basic
Right.
plot line of this novel is not interesting.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And it's so readable.
We do have to talk about the historical backdrop that the girls gradually learn, and something that Scott mentioned earlier. So let's kind of transition into that. So I think that that the neighborhood is the early 1950s, and it's normal for men to beat their wives, and for parents to beat their children, and for children to fight viciously in the streets. We see all of this in the book. None of it has any serious repercussions. As children, Leela and Elena have a limited understanding of the social and political background of their environment. And although the characters are fictional, the setting is based on a real place and time in history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, arguably the most common motif within the novel is violence. My Brilliant Friend begins in the 1950s, right after the end of World War II, a time of great complexity with regards to political activities amongst various groups and organizations in Italy. It left Naples in a state of destruction and instability. During the war, power and water supplies were destroyed due to persistent bombing, and with a ruined port, food supplies were also limited. All this destruction left an already poor city in even worse conditions, where many could not afford an education. Although Allied forces helped to restore infrastructure after landing in 1943, many of the supplies the Allies imported were stolen and sold illegally through the black market.
Which, in fact, is how the two families in the town have risen to power.
The Red Book.
Yes. Yeah, and so during World War II, the U.S. actually made deals with the organized crime bosses in Napoli in exchange for intelligence and protection of shipyards. The Camorra, or the Italian Mafia, had existed in Italy for centuries, but it was at this time, right at the beginning of Elena and Leela's story, that the Camorra began to thrive.
Yeah, and obviously World War II is something that all the adults in the novel have just lived through, but maybe the greater impact on these characters was the 1943 Italian Civil War, which I feel like is a huge missing piece of my history education, because this is like news to me that during the first part of World War II, Italy is allied with Nazi Germany, obviously under Mussolini, but by 1943, Italy was suffering military defeats, bombings, and growing public resentment towards the war and towards the choices of its leaders. In July of 1943, Mussolini is removed from power and arrested by the new Italian government, and soon afterward, this new Italian government secretly negotiated an armistice with the Allies. Germany reacted by invading and occupying much of northern and central Italy, rescued Mussolini, installed him as the head of a puppet state called the Italian Social Republic. Italy was then essentially split in two. The south aligned with the Allies, while the north remained under German control, and this triggered a civil war in Italy. The conflict became a war of occupation and a struggle over Italy's political future.
And Naples was one of the Italian cities most deeply affected by the Civil War. It was a major port and strategic military center. The city was heavily bombed during World War II, leaving thousands dead and much of the infrastructure destroyed. After Italy surrendered in 1943, German forces moved quickly to occupy parts of the country, including Naples. The occupation was harsh. German troops carried out arrests, executions, forced labor roundups, and widespread destruction as they prepared to retreat northward.
Yeah, so I mean, I just think that that's all the stuff that Lila and Lanu don't know when they're 5 years old, obviously. Yeah. But
it's the environment they're born into.
Yeah, the adults know it, and they've lived it, and they've seen friends, relatives brutally killed. They've seen their homes, their surroundings bombed and destroyed. They've seen the Nazis come in and invade their city. They've seen this political civil war, and many of them have probably participated on some level.
Yeah, and I think you get that sense because, and again, I'm not an expert on Italian fascism and World War II history, but like Naples was a little bit insulated from the Nazis, but the power structures that were enforced, you see those risen in these two families that are presented. And so you have the ideas of communism and fascism presented academically, and most people, but in their community, they respect the people with the power and the money, which come from that monarchist and that fascist sort of background. And it's just this really interesting study on the ground that seems so authentic, especially from someone who's never lived through that.
Yeah. So I think what I'm liking more about the novel as we talk about it is that we have something I'm always interested in, which is how the everyday people existed during a historical moment. So there's this huge historical backdrop, but there's all these people who are living their lives and trying to study Latin in school.
Going back, and something we just lightly touched on is going back and going back and going back, and how they're going back to Latin, but then going back to the pinnacle, which is the thing that Leela was really jealous about, which the teacher made sure that Elena told Leela, is that she was going to study
Latin.
No.
Oh, Greek.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because polis is Greek. The whole region was settled by Greeks. That was the thing. And so Napoli was under Roman control and under then eventually Mussolini's control and under this larger scope. So it is really sort of, they see themselves as that independent empire that comes from the strong Greek tradition, but under this system of oppression over millennia.
Right.
In multiple successive ways. So the ultimate escape is almost this return to the past, the deep past, this mythology that presents itself in multiple ways throughout the novel.
Yeah, and maybe this book is the modern way to write about World War II, because there's so many novels that were written in the 50s and into the latter half of the 20th century that were about people in the war, soldiers, battles. Even Hemingway was an ambulance driver in World War I in Italy and famously injured. And for whom is that? It's not For Whom the Bell Tolls, is it? Or is it
Farewell to Arms?
Farewell to Arms. Right.
Ambulance driver.
And, so we have all these
Spanish
people who are
soldiers.
directly in the war, but this is about people whose lives were impacted by the war. But we don't have any war scenes here.
No.
Yeah, I like that. There's no military actually in the book.
Yeah.
All right, right, so we've covered quite a bit. How about some closing comments? Anybody want to start with a closing comment?
Scott, you've been using the word that was kind of the word bouncing in my head the whole novel, which is like escape, and particularly Elena's interest in trying to get out. So I feel like I guess we just did the whole historical context, which makes the whole thing even more interesting to me, because you're talking about these girls being born into an era in Europe where there's devastating world events occurring, and surely survival and escape of some sense are on the minds of their parents. But so I think I just really, really liked the idea of these two girls trying to figure out, like, what's the most I can accomplish, and to varying degrees deciding getting out of the neighborhood is the most. And I just felt like the end, I mean, I'm curious if I read on, because I know, Wes, you're in book 3 now. Like, I thought the end was so sad, because Elena is not getting out. She's going to be like in the ruling class, but she's not getting out.
But ultimately, we know that they both do.
I guess.
Because of the frame narration.
Yeah, and which is interesting, though, because in the frame story, Elena mentions that Leela has never left Naples.
But
that's what she says to Rena on the phone.
It opens with, no, she totally escaped.
Yeah, she's gone.
So
she's gone.
They've both devised a way to leave.
Yeah,
we know that from the first couple sentences.
That somehow she's found a way out.
Yeah.
And
well, she's gone. She's disappeared. She's missing.
Sure.
She's left, and only Lanu knows that that's been like a fantasy of hers.
a desire
dissolving margins
to literally
dissolving
disappear.
margins.
And so I guess that's my final thought. Is I love this idea, and even the way that plays out so dramatically at the wedding with Elena just sort of seemingly on a whim deciding to shake off the control of her mother.
Yeah.
And then to sort of stiff arm the table of the neighborhood gang and go to the table of the educated.
But then be rejected ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah. And then have Nino walk out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all anyway. Yeah.
Without giving too much away, I will say that book 3 is still pretty sad. So I know that won't turn anyone off here at this table. I think for me, one of the big standout, the big appeal of the book is this friendship that is sweet, but it's also very competitive. And there are some moments that are just downright mean, especially from Leela. She has a mean streak, it's always talking about she narrowed her eyes, then you know it's coming. So I thought when I first started the book, I enjoyed it all the way through, but the first 50 or 100 pages, I wasn't really pulled in. When you start to see their friendship develop, though, and the realism behind that, maybe you've had a friendship like that, or you've known someone who has, it's very, very relatable quickly.
Yeah.
And I think it just pulls you in. And I like too that, like you've been saying, Scott, it is, in a lot of ways, it is a complicated book, and it's very complex in the emotions and the characters that it explores, but it doesn't do it in any kind of a pretentious way. It's a book that could be studied in an AP classroom, like we saw this evening. It is being studied at the university level, which I think is cool. But I can see this being something that does stand the test of time, that people are still reading in 50 years.
Yeah, I would say the same. Joe, you asked the question earlier, does this merit conversation for the first book of the 21st century? And my response would be, well, we have 74 more years. And as Wes just said, a huge criterion is, does it stand the test of time? And if I'm being predictive, I agree with you, Wes. I think this very well could. I think it does it in a way that, this could be a beach read, but this can also be studied at a very high academic level. And to me, personally, that is so much harder to do than just appealing to a population of 10% or 20%. Like, this is a book that I think could have broad, and it clearly does have broad universal appeal in any way that you want to engage with this book. It will reward the reader.
Yeah.
And so to me, I mean, I look forward to reading the rest of the series and seeing it as a whole work. I look forward to rereading it And because it's really that secondary, that tertiary reading and digging in that I think you can really justify whether it will stand the test of time and be more predictive. And having only read it once, like I was, as I said at the beginning, I was blown away. Like this is one of the best things I've read in a long time.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I think my final comment would have to be that that when it comes to the end here, it's a story. It's a really good story that then you can dive in and you can peel away. You can see the historic backdrop. You can see the feminism. You can see the struggles with friendship, and you can see the questions around narration and everything like that. But you can also sit on the beach, as you're saying, Scott, and it's a story. It's a story that draws you in and that you care about these two characters, and you feel frustrated when they can't go to school, and you feel angry with the violence and the way they're treated, and the oppression and the poverty, and you have real humans in this. These characters who feel like they're really human people who actually exist and actually are living a life. And to me, like that's the magic of fiction, when it feels like, oh wait, we're talking about people here who never existed, but we're talking about them as if they did exist because it feels like they existed. It feels real. Yeah. All right, so thanks for listening. And before we sign off, a quick plug for my novel, I Ain't a Girl, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook formats. And if you enjoy literary ramblings and would like to support the podcast, one of the best ways is to pick up a copy and share your thoughts with a review or recommendation on your favorite social media platform. And for those who like to read ahead, our next episode will be released in early July, and we'll be discussing a novel called War in War. It's the remarkable 1999 novel by Hungarian Nobel Prize winner Laszlo Krasznahorkai.
Did you mess that name up?
I think I'm messing that name up. I've been trying to learn how to say it. I'm sure it's faster than that. Krasznahorkai. How do you say it, Wes?
That's how I've said it. I'm definitely.
I know it's 4 syllables. I've been trying to break it down.
Kevin and I will ask Dominic Soboslai how to pronounce that.
There you go.
Right. But and I'm wondering if this guy isn't as well known because his name's hard to say, but it's probably not that hard to say once you say it a few more times.
Definitely not as well known as Ferrante.
Yeah, right? But he did win the Nobel Prize. He's Hungarian, and the novel is War in War, and it's challenging. It's a little different. It's rewarding, but to me, it was an unforgettable read. I read it a couple books ago, and I can't wait to reread it and get ready to talk about it as a podcast. So pick up a copy and read it before the next episode drops. And until then, thanks for listening and for following the podcast and for your support. We appreciate you downloading our episodes and recommending our episodes to your friends and even having conversations about them. We just found out that we know a person who gets her hair cut by a person who has periodically listened to our podcast. So we're getting out there a little bit.
Made some suggestions.
Yeah,
on
and
things you
actually
might want to get
suggested
into.
some things.
Actually, one of the books we already read.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, join us in early July for another episode of Literary Ramblings. And until then, keep reading and keep wondering. All right, goodbye.
Hey there, podcast family. If you love what you hear on Literary Ramblings, then don't miss out on the chance to join our growing community. Here's how you can help spread the love and support the show. First, make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune in. Hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. Next, show us some love by liking our episode. It only takes a second, but makes a huge difference in helping us reach more listeners just like you. And finally, if you enjoy a particular episode, share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. Word of mouth is powerful, and your recommendation could introduce someone new to the podcast they've been searching for. Remember, the more followers, likes, and shares we get, the more amazing content we can create for you. So join the conversation and help us grow by following, liking, and sharing Literary Ramblings today.